Before we start with what happened around the SPFL at the weekend, we're going to begin with things in the capital and with Hearts, in fact. It's been a summer of change at the club with a little bit of confusion sprinkled over the top. Stephen Naismith was named technical director instead of manager, and Frank McAvoy was appointed as head coach. Last week, we saw a comfortable victory over St Johnstone, but they were held to a 0-0 draw against Kilmarnock on Sunday in a rather lacklustre display. So we've got Lawrence Shankland's late goal away at Rosenborg in a 2-1 defeat, which is the only glimmer of hope going into Thursday's second leg Europa Conference League qualifier at Tynecastle. Laurie Dunsire, Hearts TV commentator and podcast producer of Scarves Around the Funnel. I got that right, Laurie? That's right, isn't it?
That's yes, spot on, of course, yeah.
Big Hearts fan, joining us to tell us what's going on at Tynecastle. So, just first of all, how did you find the weekend's result?
Poor performance and result wasn't the best. Playing a Kilmarnock side that unfortunately enjoy playing at Tynecastle and got 6 wins in the last 6 years at our ground. So it's a happy hunting ground for them. Going into the game though, you're playing the team that had the worst away record in the Premiership last season. Hearts generally pretty good at home if you take away Kilmarnock out of the factor. Take away the Kilmarnock factor, but it just wasn't great from Hearts. It wasn't a lot of tempo. Kilmarnock very solid under Derek McInnes. Difficult to break down, and this is where Hearts have struggled in the last few years under Robbie Neilson. Towards the end of his campaign, the big issues with fans were games where we had bulk of possession, lots of sideway passes, but not really any penetration. And it was the same on Sunday. 64% possession. There was one shot on target, and it's one of these where I was really racking my brain to remember what shot actually counted as being on target. Because if one side was going to win it, it was going to be Kilmarnock. So very frustrating, a bit too predictable, no tempo about the game. Not what you want ahead of a big European match, but at the same time, it's second game of the season. You don't want the alarm bells ringing too early on, but certainly big improvement needed.
Obviously, you mentioned that big game on Thursday. It's such a crunch match. How much priority is being given to the Conference League this season? Because surely you want to build on what happened last year.
I think it's massive for Hearts. I mean, every round you go through with the prize money you can get, it's very important. Obviously, the group stage is where it's at for Scottish clubs. The potential 5 million carrot that Hearts very disappointingly threw away in the end of last season to Aberdeen. I would say they've still a decent chance of getting to the playoff, getting to the group stage. Percentages go down a fair bit. Rosenborg are a reasonably big name, but they're not the side they used to be. Sitting 8th in the Norwegian league just now, finished 3rd last season. PAOK of Greece or Split of Croatia is likely to be the Greeks. Would offer even tougher opponents in the playoffs. So I think there's got to be an emphasis on doing our best in it, but at the same time, realistically, even at our best, we're still going to be the underdogs to make it to the group stage, and that's where the real money's at. The Rosenborg game is interesting because although we lost the first leg, I have to say I was not overly impressed by the Norwegians. It almost gave me a little bit more hope after seeing them that they're very beatable. That said, they've obviously done their homework because they did exactly what Kilmarnock did for spells and what other teams have done. They let us have possession. We had the bulk of possession, lots of knocking it around the park, but they hit quickly on the break. So they're going to come to Tynecastle. They're going to frustrate us. They're going to try and get the home fans on the backs of the players. They're not going to want to give us any momentum. It's going to be a big ask. And I'm just concerned that Sunday didn't give the fans that sort of boost that you would have hoped for. I think Sunday, a good win, first home game of the season. You go into that Rosenborg game and the fans are really up for it. Right now, we've got that little feeling that if Rosenborg kill the tempo early on, it could turn into a bit of a stuffy evening, which is not what works well at Tynecastle for Hearts.
That's interesting because I ultimately straight away think about the atmosphere you get at Tynecastle. For away fans and for away teams, it can be a really difficult place to play because it's so tight and compact. It's a wonderful atmosphere. If you've you've been there, but any listeners, it's such a great place to go if you're an away fan. But it's intimidating, Laurie, and that's what the players will be hoping for Rosenborg.
Yeah, it's intimidating, but there's also pressure on the home players. And I think that's one thing with Tynecastle. And, having spoken to previous Hearts manager Robbie Neilson, he spoke about that as well, that some players can't live up to that. And you've got different levels of it. Wow. Someone at Hearts will maybe then move to Rangers or Celtic and then they can't live up to the expectation there. Hearts sign players from other leagues or maybe from teams lower down the division or lower leagues, and there's an expectation when you come to Tynecastle. They're very demanding. If you're playing anyone, they expect Hearts to be controlling the game, and I count Rangers and Celtic in that, because Hearts fans can be fairly unrealistic at times in demands. But whoever that comes to Tynecastle, Hearts fans will expect Hearts to be the team on top, Hearts to be the team winning the match. So as much as it can be intimidating for away teams, if they do what Kilmarnock did at the weekend really well, which was sit behind the ball, not give Hearts a chance to get that kind of momentum built on the pitch or in the stands, then suddenly that pressure can switch, because the fans don't have much patience. You're sitting 30 minutes in at home and you've not created a clear chance, then actually it's the home players that start to feel that the crowd's on top of them.
Yeah.
It's obviously a bit of a strange setup just now in the dugout because of the European games. Just obviously for context, for people that don't understand it, Stephen Naismith doesn't have the badges to be classed as the manager right now in UEFA matches. So obviously Frank McAvoy's taking over that side of things. Like, what's the fans' reaction to this, Laurie? Do they care, or is it just a kind of official paperwork thing and we all know what's actually happening behind the scenes?
A bit of somewhere in between. I think a lot of the fans care. There's a bit of division about it in terms of some people don't like it. I think optics is the buzzword that gets thrown out there, that it doesn't look great. You get that chewing the fat meme that goes out there with the two coaches come from the dugout, one copy and the other.
Love it.
And, I laugh at it, because if it was another team, I'd be doing the exact same thing. If it was Hibs in the same boat, I'd be ripping the piss out of them as well. So it's a tricky one, because I think internally, so for the players, and again, if we had Craig Gordon on our podcast a few weeks ago, he said there's no doubt about the structure internally. The players, there's no problem there. They know who's in charge, who's doing different things. For fans, I think it will come down to results. What it does give is a little bit more, it's a stick to beat the team with if things aren't going well. If Hearts aren't getting results, then people start to question, is the management structure clear? Is that the problem, that you don't know who's giving proper guidance? Is it McAvoy? Is it Naismith? If they're getting results, it'll quickly get pushed to the side and people will forget about it. So I think realistically, it doesn't actually have much of an impact on the players and what's going on. But I think from the outside, a lot of fans don't like it. And like any football fan, they'll find any little thing to pick holes in. So I don't know ultimately if it's going to be a successful management team. It's still too early to tell for me. But in terms of the who's in charge and who's doing what, let's put it this way, I don't think the players are in any doubt about that. Whether that means it'll work long term, that's a whole other question.
Yeah, no, it's a free hit for the press as well. Like you say, like if things are going bad, it ultimately goes towards that. There's a wee rumor kind of doing the rounds at the moment, Laurie, potentially in the future of Lawrence Shankland. There's no doubting his huge importance to the club and the squad. Championship clubs I know are definitely looking at him. Bids possibly coming in. There's even a little inkling of maybe the Saudi League, which it's hard to really, begrudge any player who wants to go over there, other than really maybe moral levels. But the money is just unbelievable that it's hard to kind of say like, oh, well, how dare he go over there? But what are your thoughts, Laurie, on that? Do you think Lawrence is going to probably stay with Hearts?
I don't know how solid the interest from Saudi is. At very least, it's being talked about behind the scenes somewhere, but I don't know if that's a Saudi club inquired or if that's an agent trying to push their client to certain clubs. Lawrence Shankland hasn't looked quite himself at the start of the season, I have to say. He doesn't look quite fully fit, fully sharp just now. He's looked very frustrated in the games we've played, and that's maybe partly a byproduct of what I've said before, that we've not been at our best. We've not had a good tempo. We've lost Josh Ginnelly in the summer. Now, Hearts were at their best last season when Shankland was sitting behind Josh Ginnelly. Shankland is a terrific player. He's actually not in his best role at Hearts, playing as the focal point, though. He doesn't really have the pace to play as the out-and-out number 9 off the shoulder. So Ginnelly playing as the 9 worked really well because Shankland linked the play, played off him, and Ginnelly had the pace. Hearts are currently trying to replicate that with some new signings. We brought in Kyosuke Tagawa, a Japanese international. We've also brought in a Costa Rican, Kenneth Vargas, but these are still new signings to try and bed in. So he cut a bit of a forlorn figure at the weekend against Kilmarnock. He was lucky not to be sent off, actually. He'd been booked, committed a couple of little petulant fouls after that. So obviously that starts a rumour mill going as well. Is his head gone? Is it somewhere else? I don't know myself. It's hard to tell whether he's just frustrated because the team haven't been attacking as free-flowing as he'd like. But will he stay or not? I think it'll come down to money for Hearts because he's obviously a huge asset, 30 goals in 50 games, top scorer last season, a high scorer in a season since the late 80s. We talk about 3 million, 4 million, 5 million. It sounds a lot of money, but could Hearts find a player who can score almost 30 goals a season and someone who they could afford the wages for, even if they spent that money? It's hard to say. Right now, I've not heard of any solid interest in terms of bids, but I wouldn't be surprised if a Saudi club did come in that Lawrence Shankland would be interested, because why wouldn't you? Relatively speaking, Scottish footballers, this could be that life-changing one, which I always kind of roll my eyes at a little bit when you're already earning 400 grand a week. But if you're earning 5 grand a week and you get offered 200 grand a week, it's hard not to be tempted, should we say? Hypothetically, it might be hard to convince him to stick around.
Well, less of the hypotheticals. Just before we wrap up, Laurie, I want to just touch on Craig Gordon quickly. We've been seeing obviously some photos of him looking very happy in training. When are we likely to see him back? And I promise it's not just me selfishly wanting him back for the international break in September or October, but please tell me he's coming back soon.
Liar, Laura, you're a liar.
He certainly plans to be. I'd be shocked if he was anywhere near the Scotland team, especially by that next international break. I think he's planning on being back between now and Christmas for Hearts. There's no definitive date. He suffered a double leg break. He's now got a big metal rod in his leg. And being Craig Gordon, they had to struggle to find one long enough to put in his leg because he's obviously fairly tall. But he's a very determined character, and I think he plans to try and play as long as he can. If that means to his mid-40s, then he's happy to keep going. And we saw Gigi Buffon playing to that point recently. Goalkeepers, it doesn't matter so much. I think Craig Gordon keeps himself very fit and healthy. He is very determined, and he came on our podcast a few weeks ago, and that's still his plan, is to come back. He's in training. He's a long way off being ready to play a match. But I would be stunned if we didn't see him again in a Hearts shirt. It's not a given that he'll get his place straight back in the Hearts team. I'm pretty sure he will get a game again. He's club captain still. Scotland's a tougher one. You'd be looking a bit further down the line. I think you'd be looking into next year, potentially, obviously the next tournament.
So Germany then. Perfect timing.
Yes, exactly. So if Scotland need a goalkeeper and he's back playing, then I think he'll certainly be in the mix. And I don't think he expects to walk back into the Scotland squad, but I don't think we have a huge amount of options that jump out. If Craig Gordon is fit and ready and back on form, even if he is 41 by that point,
totally,
I would never write him off. He's a terrific captain to have as well. I think some things with Craig Gordon, I noticed last season I was at a Hearts event, so not only had he been playing midweek, weekend for Hearts, he'd recently had another baby, so he was only weeks, at least months old at that point, and an evening event at Hearts, and who turns up? It's club captain Craig Gordon, still there, shaking hands, speaking to fans. So he's always very committed, and I think that shows across all parts of his life, be that when he's off the field, when he's on the field, when he's in training. He still feels he's a big part of what's going on at the club, even when he's not playing. So I think he is a terrific character to have around. And as I say, I would be surprised if he didn't come back and play for Hearts. And he's obsessed with records as well. He's always wanting to get to his next milestone. He needs one more European appearance to make more European appearances than any other Hearts player. Hearts have got a big task to try and make that happen this season, because he's not going to be ready until group stages.
Who has that record, Laurie?
At the moment, it's joint between Henry Smith, another goalkeeper, and Stephen Presley.
Oh, wow. Elvis.
Yeah. Some Hearts fans don't like you mentioning his name these days, but yeah.
Oh, he's still in the record books. Maybe that's why Craig Gordon wants to take his name off the list.
Yeah, he's already taken his name off the list in terms of most Scotland caps while a Hearts player. So he's already beaten that one. So he's slowly edging Elvis out of the Hearts history books.